Hey everyone, Steve here from Big Head Tech, and I can't say the last time that I bought something that I was thoroughly disappointed. There's been times where I had high expectations when I shouldn't have. But when I bought that VivoBook 15, and I thought it would have been like the perfect, super budget, non-terrible laptop to recommend, and it turns out that even doing light work, and if you want to push it to play, esports games at thermal throttles, and I had to return it, I was a little disappointed. Then my dad got an HP laptop with a Ryzen 5 2500U a couple months ago, and it's okay, but I wasn't super excited about that either. And then I met this guy, the Lenovo Ideapad 330s-15ARR, I believe is the proper title for it. And I had a lot of hopes for it. It's a little bit more expensive at $330 plus tax, but it packs that same processor that my dad's HP has, and there's a chance that this might be a little bit different than that one, and it has even better specs than the VivoBook. The question is this one of the best laptops for the price, or best value laptops in the space out there? Is this a $330 turnkey laptop that I can recommend to anybody out there that wants to do maybe light esports games, maybe do some Adobe Photoshop and maybe some Premiere, light Premiere work on the go, a good multitasking and content consumption laptop for under $400? Well, I know that answer right now. You don't know that answer. Let's take a look at it, take it apart, talk about it, look at some performance, and see if I can keep this and not have to return it to Walmart. Don't expect a vastly different experience from the laptop I just reviewed, but we'll see. So we have some soft foam here, which is good. So that should hopefully protect it from getting damaged during shipping. Some informational stuff. Power cord, which is not USB-C, which is slightly disappointing. So nothing outside of what you would expect to get. Documentation, and a power cord, and a laptop. So let's put this aside for now. Let's take a look at this bad boy. So, as I believe I mentioned, this is $330 shipped. It is a 15-inch. Really nice, things like brushed aluminum finish. What I do like is I feel like this is a little bit bigger than the previous 15-inch that I got. Trackpad seems to be okay. Power buttons separate, which I do like to see that, so we'll power her up here. Assuming we have power, it might need to be plugged in. Keys feel fine, a little mushy, but nothing too crazy here. So since it isn't powering up right now, let's take a look at this assembly. And the exact model is the 330-15ARR. Here we go. And there we go. And then to get this open, there we go. So the very first time opening one of these up, you should probably use one of these. As you open up a couple times, it'll be easier to open it. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. Well, we have a shield, so this I like better than the previous one. So it looks like we have a shield over the CPU, and that's actually a heat pipe going directly through it. So it's a little bit different. It's not blowing over top of anything. This is probably for 2.5 inch. Yeah, it actually can take a 2.5 inch drive bay, so that's really cool. What we want to look for is memory upgrades. So that's going to be pretty important. And it has a, well, I won't say non-removable battery, but it's not easily removable. That's not the biggest deal. There we go. A 4 gig DIMM. And this is 2666. So that's actually kind of interesting. So it's not going to be the exact speed of what I have. I might just buy an 8 gig DIMM that's that speed, but we'll see. We have the NVMe, and this is an SK Hynix 256 gig NVMe drive. And then we have our Wi-Fi card. So I'm okay with this. I have absolutely no issues with this setup because this was easy to take off. And what's cool is you can put an additional SSD here. So it already has the plug for it. That I do like a lot. Before I put this back on, I want to point something out. So this has, I'll move it down here. So this is spinning. There's a heat pipe here, and that goes directly from the CPU here to cool it down. And the question is I don't know if this is spinning out or not. Logic would say that would make sense. Or, actually, no, I think this one, this is spinning, cooling down the heat pipe, okay? And then we have vents all along here to exhaust. I think that's going to be a much better solution. It's not going to be perfect, but this is also, you know, it's a Ryzen 5 2500U. So before we get to benchmarks, let's go over I/O. Kensington lock, USB, full micro card, or memory card reader. We have another USB, so we are short of USB. We have USB-C, headphone microphone, and power, HDMI out. Now, I do actually, I'm going to be doing a review on it. I have an adapter that goes from here to multiple things, so that's, having two is perfectly fine, especially since you have USB-C. So, and then this is, I believe, a 1080p, I think it's an IPS display, but let's go ahead and get her turned on. And a really quick rundown of the specs. Ryzen 5 2500U, up to 25 watts on this model from what I've experienced. That is a 2.0 gigahertz base, 3.6 gigahertz boost, and the sustained observed boost on all cores is 2.7. That's where the lower watt variants are going to differ. 4 cores and 8 threads. It comes with 4 gigs of soldered memory and also includes 4 gigs of expansion memory, both at 2666 for a total of 8 gigabytes. An SK Hynix 256 gig NVMe SSD. A 1080p IPS display as per the website. The viewing angles are pretty good, but they're real pain on the quality of the panel, but it's fine. It does have an empty 2.5-inch expansion bay. You can put an SSD or hard drive in there, as AC, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth 4.1. Now, here's the thing. We're going to be throwing a couple different systems in the setup depending on the test. So one particular step is going to come and go. I put that at the beginning, and later on it disappears because it's not a relevant test. So stock, we're going to basically run it as stock, right? So it's going to have a total of 8 gigs of DDR4 2666 megahertz. We're going to add or replace the chip with an 8 gig chip, also 2666. And then we're actually comparing this to a ThinkPad T480. That is an i5. It's almost, I won't say identical, but it's very close. Same thread count, same core count, lower base, lower boost, higher sustained boost. And it has HD 520 graphics, but we're not going to take a look at that. But let's take a look at Cinebench first. So taking a look at R15, or R21st rather, the i5 does squeak out a win, but do note it goes up to about 30 watts on that particular model. That's why the sustained load was higher. But it did win out by about 60 points on R20 multi-core. R15 multi-core barely squeaked out a win. 8 gigs versus 12 is not going to make a difference, just run over run variance. So we're probably looking at about a 20-point differential, which is very little. Not even a 10% margin of win, actually 3% margin of win, despite being 10% faster in sustained boost clocks. But anyway, when we look at our 20 single core, there's a little bit of a drop off, but the 8 gig versus 12 gig, there's a little bit more of a difference there. So having dual channel memory might actually help that particular test. So 313 to 348, so that's roughly, you're coming up around 10% there. And then R15 single core, there was a decent amount of separation, about 10 points there, another 10%. Kind of to be expected. This is first gen Ryzen technology, so keep that in mind. Now, going on to Blender, a very similar situation where the i5 definitely does take the win here. But what's interesting is the dual channel 4 and 4 did better than the 4 and 8 in Blender. I'm thinking dual channel definitely has something to do with that. And this test was repeatable. There was no thermal throttling on the Ryzen platform here. Now we're going to ditch the i5 and we're going to synthetics, then games. So from a synthetic standpoint, adding the extra memory did not help at all, which kind of surprised me, but I'm thinking because it was already maxing out VRAM usage and there's really not a lot of RAM usage on these synthetics, but they were pretty much almost margin of error. But on most of these, so Final Fantasy and 3D Mark, there was almost enough separation to say it was legit, but they're really close. But gaming was interesting. So some games were really unaffected. So Hitman 2, very little gains. Forza Horizon, very little gains. But then we look at the Division 2, we had almost double the FPS. When we look at Ghost Recon Wildlands, we were almost double the FPS. And then even a few FPS in F1. Now F1 was the only game at 1080p, the rest were low 720p. So here's the thing about this. This is a $330 laptop. That's plus tax. That's what I paid for. I didn't buy it to game. To be honest though, what I did though buy it for is if I ever get back into playing WoW, I was running like level 3, level 4 settings and I was getting like 40 to 50 FPS out in the newer open world. I suspect rating will be an okay experience, even at 1080p. I play some older games, racing sim games, stuff like that. But I needed a laptop that would be powerful enough to do some light editing on the go, be able to do, content viewing, some light gaming, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, and to be honest, absolutely blow my mind. There's actually one more that I'm going to throw up on here, and that is thermals. So we were about 57 and 58 degrees over ambient. So we were right around that 78 to 80 degrees on the CPU. The GPU die actually did not exceed about 40 degrees over ambient, but really the CPU is the concern here. Unlike the VivoBook 15, which had the really inadequate cooling solution, that was thermal throttling. This one did not. And I'm talking like gaming loads, right, where the CPU and GPU are pegged pretty hard. But what I thought was interesting was the ThinkPad T48 now, or 480. Now that's a $1,000 laptop, despite the specs being very similar. That was hitting near thermal limits, 90 degrees. So it's like, I think we're right around 78 degrees over ambient, I think is what the chart shows. And it didn't actually thermal throttle in Cinebench, which kind of blew my mind. And it was like almost 100 degrees, but it wasn't throttling. So I guess the business class laptop is a little different. But that was more so to showcase the CPU, because you can get that CPU in cheaper laptops nowadays. But the question is this the best, as it stands, laptop to buy for $330? And my answer is yes, unless you're buying used. It can do modern games. It can make it almost playable if you go 720p. A lot of your more popular games, esports games, it'll play 1080p in low settings. It'll do content creation. It has a fast SSD. It's easy to upgrade, easy to work with, good thermal dissipation, nice display. A couple years ago, I recommended a laptop to my sister-in-law. It was $400. It had one of those Pentium Ns with 4 gigs RAM and a mechanical hard drive. It was slow. This thing is blazing fast. My mind is blown what you can get for less than $400 in a laptop. Now, I put another like $80 into it. I added an 8 gig stick and a 500 gig NVMe SSD, which you've already seen the video of that, the Kingston drive. But now I'm a little bit over $400, but I really can't get a much better laptop for, around like $410 with 12 gigs RAM, a 500 gig NVMe SSD, quad cores, 8 threads, IPS display. What I really wish it would have had is an Ethernet port, which none of them seem to have, and backlit keyboard. That's kind of where it's lacking too, but I highly recommend it. If you can get a laptop of this spec without overheating issues, because some of them seem to have that, like the Asus, I recommend it. I'll see if I can find it, put a link in the description below. If you liked the video, liked it, dislike, leave a comment, get subscribed. But as always, this is Steve from Big Head Tech, and I'll see you later on down the road.